The standard answer for gathering people is to have reunions. Will we quaff a few root beers, tell a few war stories, maybe even lie a little bit? But as we put this together, there was a story which is on the back of the brochures that we'll hand out at the dedication. But it was about a dog tag that was found in Vietnam that was connected directly to a guy I knew over there, Rick Meacham. And that dog tag story generated an idea for the monument, which you're going to see. Over here you can see the plastic and foam layouts that dog tags were kind of conceptualized, and as we put them down and tried to figure out what was a good shape to do this with, it came out in a couple of varieties. Black granite is a thing that's in for memorials now. So we looked at black granite, and then we looked at bronze, and the ones in plexiglass are supposed to be bronze or stainless steel. And as we looked at all those, the one that's on the pad is the one that jumped out as the one that really looked like something different and it would be cool. And it's evolved to something even more spectacular than what you see there. You'll see it outside. But it's not about a hunk of rock, because, heck, there's rocks everywhere. It's really about people. And that group of people that were our compatriots, our friends, that died doing what we did over in Southeast Asia is really the reason we're gathered, today especially. So, as we came upon this whole... Bill, there's your... As we came upon this whole event, planning for this whole event, now we got to physically put this into being. Well, you'll see the dog tag theme not only got carried through in the monument, but the base of the memorial is shaped like a dog tag. Could have made it square around, but it seemed like it was logical. It's shaped like a dog tag. And that round plaque goes in where the hole on the dog tag would be, and it tells a nickel story.
Turn this on.
And we put nickels in the foundation as we poured it. And that's the fighter pilot tradition of a nickel in the grass, and we put those nickels with our friends. Now, there's a nickel list that I have. If you didn't sign up for one, you can sign up for one of those that are in there. And I'm also taking nickels. Jonathan gave me the last pile, and I'll take a nickel or a hard memento from anybody, and before I set that, I'll put it down. But the enlisted troops did something very special, and I'm not going to tell you what that is because I think that's going to be talked about. But as we dedicate the new exhibit, which you'll see out in the Modern Flight Gallery when we come back in for dinner, we have been royally treated here at the museum. They've done a good job, and they've given us pretty good billing. So, in a moment, Crew Chief Bob and Bob Carruthers, Bill Carruthers, and Colonel Murphy are going to say a few words, and then we will formally dedicate the memorial, the exhibit here.
My name is Bob Murphy. I was an ALO in FAC at Bamituit as a Mike FAC, and at Tonsonet as a Sundog FAC. We've heard quite a bit today about being naked. Naked in Da Nang, the FAC, naked out there, the alone, unarmed, unafraid concept. But the truth be known, we were never naked. We always had a lifeline. We had somebody called a radio operator who kept us in line, kind of, but he was our lifeline. He was our supplier of assets, and if we ever needed it, he was the one that told us our forces where to look. It's important, I think, and very appropriate that we recognize the contribution that the radio operators provided to us as forward air controllers. They were with us all the time. They were prepared to go out in jeeps like we saw in the Korean pictures today. I had a detachment on the top of Nui Ba Den Mountain who, when you flew over the fence, it was really nice to have because they knew where you were and they could provide you assets if you needed them. So without further ado, we want to say thank you to those guys. And here is Crew Chief Bob Green to do the deed. Thank you.
I'm going to have to read this because I didn't really have time to memorize everything. Bill Carruthers, my assistant. We were working on this up until the last minute out there in the hallway, so I'm hoping it's going to come out okay. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, on behalf of the Forward Air Controllers Association, I take great pleasure in welcoming you to Dayton, Ohio in the 2006 FAC reunion. My name is Robert Green. I was asked by the reunion organizers to say a few words on behalf of all the enlisted troops that served and supported the Forward Air Controllers. Personally, I think they're taking a bold risk asking the former crew chief to speak at such a formal occasion, knowing full well that crew chiefs lack many necessary social skills. But then again, they were facts, and risk-taking was their modus operandi. When we hear the words United States Air Force mentioned, probably the first thought that comes to mind is an image of a shiny, high-tech jet aircraft. And of course, the dapper fighter jock in his tailor-made flight suit, complete with leather jacket, flashy scarf. No doubt this is an image our Air Force recruiters are proud to present. However, missing in this image are the support personnel and the support squadrons so necessary for our Air Force to function. The tactical air support squadrons fell into this category. One unique difference between the task units and most Air Force units during the Southeast Asia conflict was its makeup. In a sense, we were a self-sustaining unit. Unique because we were a combination of pilots, FACs, radio operators, ROMADs, intel personnel, airborne interpreters, crew chiefs, airframe mechanics, weapons specialists, administration specialists, instrument specialists, and supply specialists. A very unique gaggle indeed. This structure was so necessary because, unlike other Air Force units stationed on a major base, the task units were assigned to numerous forward operating locations with various Army infantry units. Because of this, we had to provide for ourselves. We did not always have the luxury of drawing from the numerous specialties found on the major bases. I think it's important at this time to point out the role of the Forward Air Controllers, where they were the main reason behind our unit structure. In contrast to the fighter pilot's sortie, where they arrive on station, receive a briefing from the FAC, and then under the direction of the FAC drop their ordnance and return to base, the FAC was on station flying low and slow over the battlefield long before the fighters arrived. The FAC mission often varied in length, but would often average between 2 and 5 hours. Upon spotting enemy locations, the FACs were exposed to heavy ground fire while marking targets with white phosphorus rockets. This was necessary due to the heavy canopy jungle. The white smoke from the rockets gave the fighter pilots a precise location so they knew where to drop their ordnance. Marking the target was the most dangerous period for the FAC, for he was now low to the ground and very vulnerable to heavy weapons fire. Unsung heroes, every one of them. Try to get these photos up. Here we go. In regards to the support personnel in the task units, I want to narrow the focus specifically on our radio operators. It's unfortunate this particular group received very little recognition from the major commands for their contributions. However, the FACs and the other squadron members were keenly aware of the perils our radio operators faced. I point this out because of all the members in the task unit, other than the FAC, They were exposed to some of the harshest living conditions and the constant threat of enemy fire of any single member in the task units. This brave group of enlisted men, mostly 1, 2, and 3 stripers, performed their duties above and beyond what was ever expected of them. It's probably fair to say that very few of the radio operators had any idea of the challenges they were about to face before shipping out to Southeast Asia. Excuse me. We all had various reasons for joining the Air Force. Some of us followed family traditions, some for the opportunity to fly, and some did so to avoid the draft and the possibility of ending up in an infantry outfit. Little did we know that our assignments to a task unit would carry us into the field with an infantry unit. So much for planning ahead. So the next time you view a documentary on the Southeast Asia War, take particular notice of the radio operator on the ground with the infantry. He may well be an Air Force radio operator assigned to a tactical air control party. Our radio operators became the lifeline for our FACs. Flight following was perhaps one of their most important functions, as they kept a constant vigil on the FAC's location. They were probably the only person to know exactly where the FAC was at all times. This may seem rather trivial, but if the FAC was forced down, it was the radio operator who would know his exact location and could save precious minutes in the search and rescue operation. This was especially true during the early period of our involvement in Southeast Asia, before the airborne command and control flights were established. Please bear with me as I read a quote from one of our radio operators who was stationed with the Special Forces at Song Bay, Tangerine 31, Sergeant Jim Meade. When you work closely with someone, you begin to pick up little traits that indicate all is well, or perhaps something isn't quite right. I could tell when they were flying too low by the strength of their signals. I could tell when they were becoming tired by the tone of their voices. If I had any idea that they were getting into a situation that might be extra hazardous, or if they weren't feeling well, I tried to compensate by keeping even closer track of what they were doing and exactly where they were. It sometimes annoyed them, but I would drive them nuts, making sure that they would let me know exactly where they were at all times. By getting them a little angry at me, I could get them to refocus by blowing off a little steam. Flying long hours and straining your eyes for an hour on end can get to be mesmerizing after a while. Both of these men were the finest of pilots, but the heavy flying schedule, the frequent bouts of gastrointestinal problems, and interrupted sleep takes its toll regardless. They knew that I was looking out for them, and always calmed down by the time they got back on the ground. Well, that wasn't exactly correct, but as Jim saw it, it was. This is but one example of how dedicated the support troops were to their assignments. It's easy to assume that those of us in the rear with the gear had it made, as the expression goes. But when you consider that a FAC's life and the success of his mission depends on your performance, there is nothing easy about being a support personnel. There was a phrase coined during World War II called sweating it out. And was often used by the B-17 ground crew members, specifically the crew chiefs, but most likely all the support personnel used it at one time. I first learned of this term from my uncle, who was a radio operator flying B-17 missions over Europe with the Mighty 8th. Basically, it can be defined as a period of time, or in our case, mission duration. Not until our aircraft, in fact, returned safely to base could we relax somewhat. However, for the radio operator, even though the FAC had returned to base, he was still in the field with his assigned infantry unit. It was only when he returned to the forward operating location, or base camp as we sometimes called it, could he relax. Amongst the numerous rubber trees, plantations, and rice paddies so prevalent in the Three Corps area of South Vietnam, out in the middle of no man's land stood New Bai Den, commonly referred to as Black Virgin Mountain. From the air, it was a magnificent sight to witness. However, it was a highly prized piece of real estate for both the Allies and the NVA because of its strategic location. Numerous operations were conducted by the Allies to secure this mountain, but they never were successful. Up until the Tet Offensive of 1968, New Bai Den was thought to be a relatively secure location. However, Tet changed this thought process very quickly. Throughout the war years, it was well known that we owned the top and the bottom, but Charlie and the NVA owned the middle. Sitting on top of New Bai Den was a command bunker and numerous radio transceivers that were of extreme importance to the Allied effort, especially the radio relays used by the FACs flying in Cambodia. Perhaps one of the most dangerous assignments for an Air Force radio operator and radio repairman was duty on top of New Bai Den.
Mark 82. All right, target 8 copies. I got him on station now, and I'll be talking with him. Roger. I guess the visibility here is about 6 miles. And overcast, well, broken, I'd say, at about 7,000. One of you out there down at the ferry. Roger that. Roger, we'll be. Sundog 10 and Sundog Alpha. Roger, Alpha 10, go ahead. Weather report from the area where you're at. Okay, roger that. I'm right over Prairie at this time. It's pretty clear right in this area. Visibility is probably about 7.
Sitting on top of New Bai Den was a command bunker and numerous radio transceivers that were of extreme importance to the Allied effort, especially the radio relays used by our FACs flying in Cambodia. Perhaps one of the most dangerous assignments for an Air Force radio operator and radio repairman was duty on top of New Bai Den. In addition to their normal duties, they had to provide for their own security. Most of our radio operators were ill prepared for this.
Target, this is Chico 25, stand by, 23's got over the top. Can you tell you any comment with it? I'm not sure. I've been trying to contact him. Contact the ground element, but it's not sure. 3-5 target. Sundog 300, okay, target, go ahead. Roger, sir. You have 2-3 in sight. Okay, not at this time here. I'll get right back with him here and I'll let you know the word. Okay, sir. Appreciate it. If you get him in sight, give him a look over. That target is the one for, if something happens, we can postpone this over here a little bit and I can assist you back to the house if they can't get loose up there. Say again, 1-4. If they can't get loose at Alpha Lima up there to help him, I'll be able to go with him all the way back to 102. Okay, sir, good copy. Let me find out how serious it is before I break anybody away. Roger. Okay, this is Chico 35 on Victor. I'm right in the area now. I've got him in sight. And it looks like he's okay. He's going back there for the strike here real quick. I'm going to go down and talk to him.
That's just one example of a radio operator keeping track of flight following. It was one of their duties. In addition to normal duties, they had to provide for their own security. Most of our radio operators were ill prepared for this, but quickly learned how to adapt and defend the camp from their fighting positions. Thankfully, most received a quick lesson in weapons and infantry tactics courtesy of the U.S. Army. New Bai Den was under constant siege. Many times the NVA and the Viet Cong tried to penetrate the perimeter, and on several occasions overran the command bunker. The only means of support for our troops was from air power and artillery. But due to heavy weather conditions, air power was not always available. The NVA was well aware of this and often attacked during these periods. Living conditions on top of New Biden were very primitive. All supplies, whether it was food, water, or ammunition, had to be brought in by helicopter. Eddie Howe, one of our radio operators from the 21st Task, described his duties on top of New Biden as living on a bomb, knowing it was going to explode, but never knowing when. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This was the constant threat they had to deal with. Eddie pointed out that no one ever walked off of New Biden. Evacuation was performed by helicopter only. This was especially true during the Easter Offensive of 1972 when the NVA overran the command bunker. Once the top was recaptured, our radio operators and radio repairmen were back again manning their positions and performing their duties. Colonel Robert Corley, United States Army retired, the senior Providence advisor for Bin Long Province, headquartered at An during the Easter Offensive of 1972, recently pointed out that our radio operators on New Biden came to his aid when there was no other means of contacting headquarters. It is important that our radio operators know that their sacrifices were instrumental in saving the lives of numerous American and Allied forces. For this, they should be extremely proud. Although they may never have received a Medal of Commendation for their effort, let it be known they have won the respect of their fellow warriors. I hope this presentation has given you a small glimpse of life in a tactical air support squadron. Not many people, and this includes many in the Air Force community, had any idea of our contributions, our living conditions, and our daily struggles. For this reason, the stigma of the word support is very misleading. Numerous times when returning to a major air base after spending months in the field living in the dirt, the mud, it was difficult to adapt to the rear echelon mentality. It's truly sad that our rear echelon brothers didn't get to share our experience. No doubt they wouldn't be so quick to criticize our less than perfect military bearing. However, such is life in the support role. I had the honor to serve my country with many brave and dedicated men. The bonds we formed during this period were stronger than I could have ever imagined, but I never realized it until years afterwards. This reunion before us is an opportunity for all to reaffirm our bonds, but most importantly, we have the opportunity to honor our lost brothers who have given their lives in defense of our country. They may be fallen, but they are not forgotten. Thank you very much, and once again, I welcome you to the 2006 FAC reunion. Can I read Eddie's letter?
An open letter to all forward air controllers participating with the 21st Task in South Vietnam. Dear forward air controllers, FACs, it is with deepest respect and admiration that I'd like to congratulate you on your 2006 reunion. I am with you in heart and spirit. I wish I could be there with you. I'd just like to share my thoughts on what we thought of you as brothers in the Battle of South Vietnam and Cambodia. We knew the courage and commitment you demonstrated on every mission you flew. The majority of the time, you were alone and behind enemy lines. I can only imagine the stress and the pressure you confronted as you flew over the dense forest and jungle terrain in search of the enemy or downed comrade. I can only imagine the courage and dedication you had to overcome as you took enemy fire, knowing that if you bailed out, it would be short of a miracle to get you back. I can only imagine the overwhelming pressure you encountered as you directed airstrikes over extremely hostile areas such as An Loc. What I do remember the most, however, were the voices and call signs with no faces. Believe it or not, I still remember many of your voices. I remember the coolness and at times the fear and frustration in your voice and the calls for help when you needed it. I remember your responses to our calls for help when we were under attack. I could only sense the sincere bond between us and you. I was fortunate to have known some of you personally, like Captain William Delaplane, Colonel Hogue, Colonel Moran, and a few others, but in general, I regret we did not socialize as a team. We were, in my opinion, a great team, the 21st TAS. Not a day passes that I do not remember the year like it was yesterday. I just want you to know that you were not alone. We were with you on every flight and every mission. We admired and respected you for what you did. You are the elite, most courageous, the bravest, and the best of the best. You soared as eagles and fought like brave men. I know God has taken those we left behind. He still has a place for each of you. May God bless you and always remember you. We're with you and to make sure of your safe return after each mission. Respectfully, your brother-in-law, Eddie Howell, Radio Operator, Sundog Alpha, Ramrod Bravo, Pawnee Target, Sundog X-Ray, Chirp Alpha, and Sundog Control.